All right, guys, welcome to the first Zoom of May, which is our May 3rd pre-recorded Zoom, because I'm pretty sure the Friday call was like the last day of April. Yeah, or like the second to last day of April. But anyways, with that being said, new month, therefore we just got our monthly closure, right? And we're coming right around, midway through the quarter. And let's see, I'm very curious to see how we're going to react over the next 2 to 3 weeks, because it's very, very important. If you guys remember what we spoke about in a couple of weeks ago, is that before last week, the previous week before, we had closed super bullish, and that's why we pretty much would have anticipated a super, big candle to the upside. But what we have to realize as well is these candles leave obviously inefficiency in place. And when you try to compare that, obviously, you could see that obviously here, there's still inefficient pricing. So it doesn't necessarily 100% attract it, right? But it's a good sign, because a lot of momentum will usually lead to at least a little bit of recovery, right? And as you can see here, for example, right, we have technically high momentum, and then the inefficiency was filled before we continued higher. So realistically, if I'm looking to take another long position, I do want to see a recovery, because like we say, we want those bullish transitions on a bearish pullback, right, and vice versa. So with the month closing out very, very, very bullish, right, it's hard to, justify anything outside of the bullish scenario, because once you start to zoom in, right, you guys know where the bias has been, you guys know where we pretty much have been targeting, and that target has been met, right? So here's something to keep in mind once we're looking at this internally. So there is some pretty good scenarios this morning in regards to legitimately seeing, a push to the downside. We had actually a small recovery early New York, but what I want to acknowledge first of all is, where is our medium-term direction going? Obviously up, right? So when I'm looking at this from a structural perspective, realistically, even if I have internal unwillingness here, right, this is my invalidation point of trend, right? My invalidation is in play. So there is technically internal unwillingness via our preliminary break of structure, which is our continuation BOS. We know that that is a continuation BOS, and as you can see, we have the mitigation continuation, and that eventually led to an internal liquidity grab. Excuse me. I'll do this a different color. Internal liquidity grab. Basically here, right? I know that didn't fully break, but there is the preliminary break there as well. So with this giving us a sign of potential unwillingness, you could see price drive lower. However, right, here's something important. We did not make a new low. We did not meet our invalidation. So realistically, right, trying to come here and look for a transition is a bit counter trend. It's a bit less probable, because we have not created a new structural range. Because now, right, although this is high momentum, and you can see here that, it's obviously high momentum, but there is a structure break internally. So because that internal structure break is there, that means that this is also internal unwillingness, but in the opposite direction. So we now have internal unwillingness, right, in terms of potentially seeing a reversal. And then we have internal unwillingness here, which is the counter move, which is pretty much now correlating with the original direction, which was up. So if you were to ask me, the probability of seeing a transition here, in my opinion, is a lot more slim, right? But we'll get into that in a bit. But I realistically am expecting more so to meet this target, right? Because we have failed to break a significant low, and I'll tell you what invalidates that internally in a bit. But because of how strongly bullish we have been, right, it's really, really hard, in my opinion, to justify, anything in the opposite direction. Especially if we start to zoom out, you can see that was a very, very quick move. So that means that internally, the bullish momentum is also relatively high. So as of now, right, if we wanted to zoom in, right, what would invalidate, what would be, something that could give us a bearish scenario, and that would be, right, obviously there's a potential SC here. This looks like more of an H1 wick or an H1 candle. 15 minute. Right, you could see there's also an inefficiency fill. So there, in my opinion, there is no true POI here to play off of just yet. And, you know, I'm also supporting the case where we're seeing the continuation in terms of bullishness. So as we start to dive in deeper, right, obviously if we want to transition, we would need, you know, something to be shown from a model perspective. And as you can see right now, right, we are heavily bullish, right? There's still a turbulence point potentially there, right? This is giving us the reaction because you're seeing, right, potential liquidity grab into the upside. And you could see that there was even a potential pause here, right, where we tried to see a mitigation. Mitigation did not even give a proper reaction, but it gave something, and that is showing us that it's failing at the moment. So unless we are to see, you know, something along the lines of structural disruption or anything in terms of just internal liquidity grab here, that would be a more probable transition to where you can capitalize from the reversal perspective. But it's just harder to justify because in the back of my mind, right, I've already discussed why this makes more sense to be bullish. And if we even dive in deeper to the bullish perspective, right, we see inefficiency here, inefficiency 50% relative, but more importantly, there are relative equal lows here, and those were taken out, right? Remember, liquidity is our fuel. So it's just really hard for me to justify any type of bearish scenario as of now, right? There's nothing internally, there's nothing giving us signs of bearishness, right? So I would more so rather like to see that target be met, right? And then if we see a bearish transition, now that makes a lot more sense because now there is a potential unsubstantial new high and we are seeing a potential bearish transition. And obviously with the internal price action, it could make a lot more sense and a lot more justifiable to look for that reversal. But as of now, it's just a lot harder to justify that. And I mean, it's 11:50, it's about to be 10 minutes until the hour, and this hour is about to close extremely bullish. So it's just a lot harder to justify these, you know, bearish scenarios. Same thing kind of relatively here with AU. We know where our bias was, right? This, in my opinion, nothing really changes here. You guys know that we have been pretty much bearish on this since here. But what's very interesting here per se is, right, the structural disruption where we see the failed reaction and then creates a new structural range. And we're currently relatively around 50%. And once we start to dive in deeper, right, our internal is still bullish. You could see here, excuse me, right, because we see our liquidity be taken going into a new internal structural range, internal liquidity grab. So now this is going to be very crucial to see whether or not we're going to continue higher or if this bullish pullback is going to transition to the downside. But yeah, no real change of bias in AU just yet either. Same thing with EURUSD. Let's see. Same thing with EURUSD. We saw this today, but like I said, this doesn't matter to me. It's not, you know, this is very hardcore counter trend. It's a lot more. Yes, there's an internal model there because I was looking at that this morning. Right, there is. Let me delete these two. Okay, like there is, obviously we're compressing, and within session or right before session, I'm sorry, about an hour before session, you see an unsubstantial new low takes up preliminary structure, and there's liquidity grab. So there is a justifiable position in here, right? But why am I pursuing this when my bigger picture is this? You know what I mean? It's just a lot harder to justify. That does not mean that there's something justifiable here with the sell, but what I'm trying to say is the sell is a lot more probable because of that, because that's pretty much what we've been in this entire time. So as of now, I personally think there is no trade because we are not creating new highs and we are not creating new lows. We did not create a new low because there is a break of structure. This is a solidified low. And now this is a solidified high because internally, right, we have just taken out preliminary structure. So this is pretty much technically no man's land. And now is whether the time to see whether or not we're going to see some type of schematic, we're going to see some type of transition, right? Because there's already been, right, one attempt at a bullish move, and now there has been 2 bullish attempts at a bullish move. So this would pretty much align with DXY, who's to say we don't obviously create a new structural range because we have not taken out structure, and this would justify the target of this move, right? So who's to say we don't see this and then get a transition, and now that liquidity has been cleared, we can now aim for relative equal highs, and this is also part of that relative equal highs, which would be here, and that would be a reasonable target. And if that reasonable target is actually met, then we know that that is now a bullish liquidity grab, and we're seeing a potential schematic in play, right? We're pretty much 1 tap, 2 tap, 3 tap, and a transition. But I don't want to make that assumption just yet, guys. I'm just opening you guys up to the potential possibility, because that is pretty much what we see here. Right, 1 tap, 2 tap, 3 tap. And obviously if the volume aligns as well, then we're seeing more confirmation. But as of now, let's see if this low volume could actually give us a move down here, because we have seen potential signs of demand. So this is going to be very, very crucial here. I am very, very confident that this would actually reach here. Obviously, I know I'm not 100% correct, but that just seems much more probable to me, just based on how we have been internally and how we have been, you know, from a structural perspective, which is pretty much the whole case that I just built around DXY. So yeah, as you can see right now, still going up. We'll see how this reacts over time. But yeah, that'll probably conclude today's call, and I will see you guys on Friday.